Welcome to the week 3 go-to session. This is the third session out of 4 that we're holding this month. Remember, there's an associated quiz to take related to this content that's due Thursday. The good news is I don't have as much to go over in this session. I just need to talk about what we're doing this week, and then I want to get into more detail about APA format because we only touched on it briefly last week, and this week I want to spend a lot more time with it. But it will be beneficial because I'm actually going to walk you through a lot of the steps that you would normally have to figure out on your own. So I think that's going to be really, really helpful. So that in week 4, when it's time to actually write your essay, you can hit the ground running and not have to worry about how to deal with things like margins and spacing and paragraphing and all that, because we'll walk through it together. And actually, if you want to, I would go ahead, if you want to follow along in real time, to open up a Microsoft Word document, a blank Microsoft Word document, because then you can follow along with me as I do the steps. But if not, you can watch that section of the video again after the fact. But it might be more useful if you follow along in real time. Okay, so we have 2 things to talk about this week. The first is the main assignment for this week that's due on Sunday. I'm going to scroll down here on the page. So we're in week 3, and the big thing we're working on this week is assignment 3.5, okay? Reviewing the plans. It's essentially a discussion board assignment, and it's really just peer review. So even though it has a fancy title and even though it has an assignment sheet to read through, the essence of it is pretty simple. We're going to be giving each other feedback on the briefs you created that you handed in on Sunday. Okay, so if I click on the board, 5 people have pasted. Those of you who have not, you need to paste your brief to the discussion board. It's something I probably should have reminded you about during last week's session. It just slipped my mind. So you'll literally take the text of your brief. I've already modeled my example. Remember, we took a look at my brief last week. Okay, so I sort of show what you need to do, and a couple other people have done the same. Quentin's posted his, Montana's posted hers, Danica as well. Okay, so those of you who haven't, you need to do this. Essentially, taking your brief and just copying and pasting it onto the discussion board, because this is the way that we'll be able to respond to one another's work. I have the assignment sheet already open. You can read through this mostly on your own. I'm going to explain this in common sense terms because it's really pretty simple. There are 2 parts. Part 1 is to copy and paste your brief to the board. Okay, so really simple. Just put it there. I think about a dozen of you handed in your briefs on Sunday. So if only 5 of you post to the board, the other 7 or 8 of you, you need to post your work to the board. So that's part 1. Easy peasy, as my kids like to say. And part 2 is just you need to respond to 2 of your classmates' briefs. Okay. And let's get all the giggling out of the way about how we're looking at each other's briefs and commenting on each other's briefs. But that's what we're doing. Okay, we're gonna look at 2 of our classmates' briefs and give feedback. The assignment sheet talks about the RISE model, which I introduced during the week 1 go-to session. So if you need to review that part of the session, please do so. But I'm going to give you some tips in the presentation tonight that will help you produce quality feedback, even if you don't remember the RISE model or you don't care about the RISE model. The RISE model is great, but I think there's a way to provide thoughtful feedback just intuitively as well. So I'll give some suggestions on how to do that. So that's really the gist of the assignment. Okay, you're going to post your work to the board, and then you're going to comment and give feedback to 2 of your classmates. There should be a 300-word minimum for each response, so it's pretty in depth. I'm not going to be counting to see if you get exactly to 300 words. 300 words is approximately 1 page of double-spaced text written in 12-point font. But again, I'm not going to be counting. I'm going to be looking more at the quality of the feedback rather than the quantity. But yeah, you want to avoid just writing 2 or 3 sentences and calling that your response. Okay, these are sort of in-depth, thoughtful responses. And everything's essentially due on Sunday, but don't wait until the last day. I don't want to see a bunch of people pasting their work to the board on Sunday and responding to 2 people on Sunday and doing everything on Sunday, because that means that there's not the full class participating together, offering each other the full range. I mean, if the 5 of you have already posted to the board, if it just remains the 5 of you, that means that you're only responding to each other, and then everybody who enters late, it creates a whole sort of chaotic thing. So don't wait until the last second. Okay. Yeah, see, there's even By the way, I'm not trying to pass the buck, but I didn't create this assignment sheet. There's even some conflict here. It says they only have to be 250 words each. So again, I'm not going to be counting each word in your response. Okay, so let's get into information about giving feedback, because like what should we be doing? What kind of feedback should we be offering? So let's talk about peer review. Uh, okay, I kind of covered what we'll discuss tonight. Peer review. How many of you have participated in some form of peer review before? You can answer in the chat session below. Like you've done something in high school or another college level English class where probably what you were put into groups and you exchange papers, right? And this is one of the things I like about the online format, because sometimes when you're in a live classroom environment, students tend to see it as busy work. They're put into groups. The teacher tells them to exchange papers. Sometimes there are individual questions that you have to answer. And most people don't want to do it. And they just say, oh, good job. Or I would give it an A if I were the teacher. Or looks good to me. And then they don't really move past that. The good thing about doing this in the entirely online format is you have the time and space to work on these things when you want to. If you want to look at someone's brief and think about it and then come back hours later or the next day, you can do that. You can create the time and space needed for when you are ready and you have the energy level to participate fully. So that's one of the things that I like. That it's kind of open ended. But let's talk about like what we expect from peer review then. Right? What do we expect from our classmates? So let me ask you guys, and you can use the chat session below again to give your responses, or you can raise your hand and speak out loud if you're feeling brave. What kind of feedback, just intuitively, okay? Briefs, maybe you never wrote one before. The assignments in this class might be different than what you've done. But in general, like what kind of writing feedback is not helpful? What sort of student feedback that you receive from your peers makes you look like the woman in this picture, right? With a classic face palm gesture. Any ideas? Stuff that's not helpful? Don't all attack at once. Okay, Quentin says if someone says this paper is stupid. The good news is I don't know if people are that intense, but I do get the gist of when people are sort of so rooted in opinion, like they're bringing their baggage to the discussion. That's something that I mean. I'm pretty good. Listen. I'm the instructor. I don't do those things. But I listen. There are times where I might have strong opinions about things, but I have to keep myself in check. Right? It's your paper. It's your topic. It's not mine. I can give suggestions. I can sort of play devil's advocate or have you think about things, but yeah, I'm not going to get too personal in my feedback. Taylor says direct criticism. Okay, I think I know what that means. I mean, it is important to give constructive advice, and we're not just patting each other on the backs and saying "good job, looks awesome." We are giving one another suggestions for improvement. But yeah, I think there's a danger with if you're too direct or if it's all criticism. Evan says nothing negative, but you're keeping it honest and helpful. Yeah, I think that's key too. Although I don't know if you mean nothing negative is what you prefer. I'm assuming you mean that it's a bad thing when nobody has any suggestions for improvement. That the importance is to keep it honest and helpful. I think that's what you mean there. And yeah, I'd agree with that. Other things that students often say, vagueness, right? It's like, yeah, looks good, but you don't know specifically what's good or what's powerful. Or this was confusing, but there's no explanation about what confused you. So vagueness, like lack of specificity, that's another big one. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Those are probably the main ones. Making things too personal, either sugarcoating, not giving any constructive feedback, or doing the exact opposite and just diving into negative critique right away. And then, yeah, that lack of specificity. So, of course, the kind of feedback that's helpful we just discussed, right? It's the complete opposite of everything that we just mentioned. It's specific, it's helpful, it's constructive. It stresses both what's working well and what could be improved. And I try my best when I read anything actually, but especially student work, but it applies to anything that I encounter out there. If I'm watching a film or listening to a CD or any sort of thing that someone has created, I try to look at it in the most generous terms possible. Like I don't go into a movie wanting to hate it, even if it got terrible reviews. I try to be as generous as possible. And if I don't like it, I don't like it. Um, Same thing with anything. And same thing when I'm responding to writing. Okay, I try to look at everything in the most generous terms possible. I don't think it's terribly useful to already be sort of defensive, looking just for mistakes or errors or criticisms. And I think if you come in with that sort of spirit, that you're trying to be helpful and you're keeping yourself sort of even keeled, that will help you just mindset wise in terms of giving feedback that isn't all sugar coated and all negative, but is really sort of a helpful balance between constructive criticism and selective praise. Okay, so that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on this week when we're looking at each other's briefs. I got to find a different word for this assignment other than briefs. It keeps sounding so odd. Here's another useful thing to think about. I like to think about feedback as falling into one of two general categories. On the left here, we have issues related to higher order concerns. Okay, so this is like big picture stuff like thesis, content, organization. For your assignments, these terms apply to things like the problem you've identified in your industry, the solution you've presented, right? Because that's captured in your thesis. For the brief, the content will be the listing of your reasons. Organization is kind of handled for you in this case. That probably applies a bit more to when you hand in your work in essay form. Here, the organization was kind of given to you, right? You list your problem, you list your solution, you word your thesis, list your 3 reasons, etc. The stuff here on the right, lower order concerns, is the smaller stuff, okay? The smaller fish. Grammar, sentence structure, proofreading, style. For this assignment, we really need to be staying over here. This should come natural because it's a brief, right? It's not a full piece of writing. But still, sometimes students are tempted because sometimes they feel nervous. They don't want to comment on the person's solution. They don't want to comment on the thesis. They don't feel comfortable giving feedback. And by the way, there's one piece of advice I'll give right now, which is that we all accept that we're sort of big boys and girls and that we can handle feedback. I mean, yes, it should be politely worded. It should be constructive in nature. But listen, if someone gives us a piece of advice that we don't agree with, we can make the decision to say, hey, I don't agree with that, or this person had the best of intentions, but I disagree. Okay, but we can handle that advice. So I'd say, throw yourself out there. Don't feel shy about commenting on these sorts of higher order issues. But sometimes people get so scared that they run over to the right. Like they love to point out when something's misspelled, or they love to point out that something should be capitalized. Yes, Evan, both parties should be open-minded. Okay, nobody likes to hear feedback. I mean, it's one of the most anxiety-producing things in my life. I'm 43. I'm not in a situation where I'm constantly being critiqued. But yeah, when it's my annual review time at my job, even though I know I'm going to get a decent review, the butterflies are still flowing. Nobody wants to hear. I mean, it's pretty human nature. You don't love to hear constructive advice, but hey, we can deal with it. But yeah, some students will run so far away that they'll just comment on, oh, this word is misspelled, or oh, there should be a comma here, or don't you know Eminem's name needs to be capitalized at the beginning? And for this activity, right, this stuff isn't as important. If you briefly want to point out something, like if someone's entire post is written in text speak, sure, mention that and say, hey, this course does emphasize professionalism. You might clean up, or you should have cleaned up your brief. That's fine. But we need to be staying over here for the most part, okay? And here are 3 just general tips I'm going to give. By the way, all this information, higher order concerns versus lower order concerns, these 3 feedback tips I'm giving you, they might in this case means will, relate to some of your quiz questions. So you might remember these or jot them down. But feedback tip number 1 is be positive. Okay, I already covered that. If you're coming in with the most generous mind possible, you'll probably be in a good place mentally to respond with care. And by the way, it should come as common sense, but you know what? Sometimes we have bad days. Sometimes we've had stressful days. Sometimes the kid is screaming in the other room. Sometimes, I don't know, someone got your order wrong at the restaurant, right? And that can carry over into what you're doing when you're responding to people. So, but if we remember to be positive and be generous, we should hopefully keep that in check. Feedback tip number 2. Yeah, be specific. Okay, if something is working well, be specific about why it's working well. If you're really impressed with one of the reasons that one of your classmates is listed in his or her brief, yeah, sure, point that out, that's working well, but you might even go a step farther and comment why it impresses you or why it's working for you. But the same thing with constructive advice. If something seems fuzzy or something doesn't seem like it's worded as clearly as it could be, or that, by the way, there's an instance where low order concerns would probably make sense. If someone has, for example, presented a reason that feels kind of solid, but you can't quite make sense out of it because the wording feels a little bit off, then there's a good example of when to press the writer to be a little bit more specific or concrete in his or her wording. But yeah, whether we're giving constructive advice or whether we're praising something, be specific. Feedback number 3, when offering critique, I should replace the word criticism with something less negative. Constructive advice. When offering constructive advice, use softeners and qualifiers. We know what that means, right? When I say softeners and qualifiers, you get that? Like, I don't have to explain that, do I? My little pillows here that spell out the word love kind of hints at that. I do it all the time with you guys. Like, I'm always saying, oh, this seems a bit unclear, or I was a little bit confused, or I wonder if. And typically that sort of filler, those of you who took the extra credit activity about how to eliminate filler from sentences, usually that's the kind of stuff we want to eliminate. Here is a rare instance where adding some padding to your wording actually is beneficial, because it's a way, because you don't hear the person speaking in real time, you don't get to see their facial expressions. These are sort of textual cues that sort of soften things for the reader. Okay, because sometimes we don't even mean to sound harsh; it just comes across that way because the words on the page can really be stark. So those are my 3 tips. Okay, be positive, be specific, and when offering constructive advice, use softeners and qualifiers. Okay, so here are some things to check for. So if you're not crazy about the RISE model, or you don't remember what the RISE model is from week 1, here's a general checklist of things to look for, and they're pretty basic things. I don't think you necessarily need to know this. You probably would think this already, but if you want to jot them down or take a screenshot, please do. But check through basic things like, is the problem clearly stated, and is the problem concrete? Okay, at this stage, everybody should have a concrete problem that they're addressing and examining and ultimately offering a solution for. Okay, so that problem needs to be pretty concrete and clear. The good news is I think most of you are there. Okay, I worked with some students over the weekend who actually had very, very good problems, but we were struggling to come up with a solution. That's a pretty rare case, but most of you should have the problem part hopefully solid. Obviously, the other end of that is also equally important. Is the solution feasible? Is it direct and efficient? Does it seem practical? Oh my gosh, look at that. Oh, hold on. Seem. Nobody saw that, right? The instructor never makes spelling errors. I wish I could say that was autocorrect, but that wasn't autocorrect that did that. So, let's take a real quick look at my brief. Okay, remember mine from last week? Okay, my problem, royalty rates paid out by streaming music services. My solution, music fans need to be encouraged to purchase monthly subscriptions. Okay. You can weigh in on that. You like that solution? You don't like it? I'm not going to ask you now if you like it, but if you want to comment in the chat, anybody have an issue with my solution? You don't like it? But that's one of the things that you can personally weigh in on. Yes, I warned about bringing too much personal opinion. You don't want to just bring your personal baggage to the discussion, but sure. I mean, I think there's a polite way to challenge someone's solution, or to offer a way to tweak it, or to offer an alternative, or to offer some sort of, some twist on it that makes it a little bit different, or more practical, or more realistic. So you can weigh in on those things as well. Is the solution feasible? Is it direct and efficient? Does it seem practical? Are those 3 listed reasons solid? Okay. One of your tasks for the brief was to present 3 reasons for why your issue is important and why your solution should be considered. Look at those reasons and evaluate them, and use common sense. Like, are 2 of the reasons basically just repeating the same thing? Maybe the writer needs to know that. Does one seem like it's, I don't know, fuzzy? Does another one seem just too rooted in personal opinion, as if the writer is just expressing her viewpoint of the world instead of offering something that's maybe a little bit more grounded? Okay, you can weigh in on those things. And lastly, look at those pieces of evidence. Where do they come from? Are the sources cited trustworthy and authoritative? right? The reason might seem solid. They put in a URL, right? The full APA reference for whatever piece of evidence they're citing to support their reason. And if you go to it and find it's just some person's blog and you can't check who that person is or whether they have authority or whether they have credibility, those are things to point out as well. So basically, it's kind of common sense, right? You're going to look at every aspect of the brief and just respond as naturally and helpfully as you can, and put yourself out there. Okay, I do it all the time. I do it with your topics. I don't try to be mean spirited. I don't try to be harsh, but I tell you, like in week one, oh, this seems too broad, or this seems entirely rooted in just your personal opinion, which would never be able to be researched. We need something concrete. So you can weigh in sort of personally, but just do so with care. And with and in doing so as specifically and helpfully as possible. So if you're doing that and you're writing thoughtful responses that are, 200 word ish, you should be okay. Mostly I'll be grading because I'll try to put myself in your mindset and try to imagine how helpful you're trying to be for two of your classmates. Okay, because we're trying to help people get things in order so that when it's time to take your brief and turn it into an essay, and I'll talk about that specifically in week 4, how you're going to take that basic information that you've put in your brief and just transform it, right? You have your 3 reasons. Those 3 reasons will become your 3 separate body paragraphs. So if everything's more or less in place, then we can hit the ground running, and writing the paper becomes much, much easier. Okay, now we're going to change things up a bit, and I'm going to talk about APA style. I think I showed this slide in week 2's session, but it's worth pointing out again. And when we talk about APA, we're talking about 3 things, right? Layout and format. So that's how things look, like paragraphing, fonts, page numbers, header, in-text citations. So when it comes time to write your essay, anytime you use a fact or statistic in the paper, anytime you use a quotation in the paper, there's an official way we need to cite that right there and then in the paper. And last week we just got into this, how to create an end of the paper reference. Okay, I'm going to go a bit more into detail about the number 1 and number 3 here, layout and format, and references. We're going to save in-text citations for week 4 because this stuff is probably more relevant when it comes to actually writing the essay. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much APA information right now. But this would be a good point, if you haven't done so already, to open up a blank Microsoft Word document, because we're going to walk through this first step here, paragraphing, font, page number, header. We're going to do that together as a class in real time during this walkthrough. Is there anybody who doesn't have Microsoft Word? No? Okay, good. By the way, I feel terrible for saying this, but I get like a little caution symbol when I see that people have wandered away from the presentation. And right now, like all 4 of you are, who knows where, ESPN.com or CNN, or I'm not going to yell at people. I know that people can do 2 things at once. You might be hearing what I'm saying, but now that we're getting into a visual part of the thing, where it would be nice if. Okay, well, Quentin has a good reason. If you were wandering away to okay, good. I apologize. It's just that there are other sessions where it's like, oh my gosh, the people have wandered away, which is shocking because I'm so much fun. Okay, so if you don't have Microsoft Word, you can use something different like Google Docs, or I strongly recommend, I'm going to type it in the chat, Microsoft OneDrive. This is the online free tool, because almost everything now is cloud-based. So even if you don't own the software, you can typically find it online. If you go to Microsoft OneDrive, you can just sign up for a free account, and you can use free tools like the word processing program. That will be beneficial because the steps I'm going to give you are going to be done using Microsoft Word. So if you don't have Word, you can use another program like Pages or Google Docs word processor. It just means you might need to look in different locations. Okay, so I have a blank document open. The first thing we need to do is I have this little guy here called Layout. I'm going to click on that tab. And the first thing we're going to do is set our margins. Okay, an APA, top, bottom, left, right, all get set to 1. So top and bottom are set to 1, but left and right margins are not. So I'm going to change that to 1. And you may not see it, but it's actually occurring in real time, the changes on the ruler. So I'm going to change. Okay, boom. Right now, by the way, we're creating the cover page. We need to create what's called the header. This is the segment of information that's going to appear on every page of your document. And in Microsoft Word, it's pretty easy. You just double click near the top inch or so of your page. So if you double click, you're in the header. And the first thing we need to do is type the word running head. Actually, I'm going to double check something real quick. I'm gonna present this website a little bit later, but Project APA Info, which I've mentioned in the past, it's got a sample you can look at, so you can always double check things. Like even I don't remember all the rules sometimes off the top of my head, and have to look. Usually it appears. I don't know why it's not popping up. How about if I just download the file? There we go. Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember if H in head needs to be capitalized or not. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Microsoft Word thing, running head, colon, and then the title of your paper gets put in all caps. I'm just going to call this placeholder title. Obviously, you'll have a completely different title. You know what a placeholder is, right? So I'm just making up a title. The next thing we need to do is insert page numbers. There is a page number function here, but I always like to go to the full menu because then I can choose where the page number goes. And it typically has it automatically set up where I want to go. So I'm going to go insert page numbers. And yeah, it's right where I want it, in the top right corner. So I'm just going to click OK. And boom, our header is set up. So we can just click out of there or click close. And then what we need to do is go to approximately the center of the page. Okay. And we're going to do three things. We are going to type the name of our paper again, but this time not in all caps. So I'm just going to make up my generic title, placeholder title. You're going to put your name. I'm going to use my full name and the name of your school. So the Los Angeles Film School. Okay, but that looks terrible. You can just tell visually that's not right. So we're going to highlight everything, go back to the Home tab, center this, double space it. Okay, in my version of Word, it's this little up and down arrow thingy. Change it from 1.0 to 2.0. And also this establishes double spacing for the entire document. So I don't need to double space anywhere else. We're already set up. And the other thing we need to do is make sure this information is more or less in the middle of the page. And you can just do that by eyesight. So it looks like it needs to be bumped down a little bit. That looks good. Okay. Boom, there's our cover page. Easy. The next thing we're going to do is just keep hitting enter until we get to the very first line of the second page. Okay, the very first line, and we stop. There we are. We're going to put our title again. Note, we're not going to bold it. We're not going to underline it. We're not going to italicize it. We're not going to put it in size 18 font. We use one font size and style for the entire document, okay? From top to bottom, from up here to all the way down to the references page when we get there. One consistent font size and style. We're going to hit enter once, not 10 times, okay? Make sure that our cursor is off to the left. Hit tab to indent because the first line of a new paragraph is always indented. And then we can just start typing away, right? I can start typing away. I'm going to copy this just to demonstrate something. And then, yeah, you can start typing your essay. You won't be doing what I'm doing, which is just generically copying and pasting the same phrase, but this is supposed to represent the text of your essay. Okay, and the point I want to make is if you set up everything in advance, like you have double spacing set up, you have the formatting set up, you can just keep typing and things wrap around. Most of you know this, okay? But it's for the one or two of you, and I'm not making fun of the one or two people. Not everybody's super familiar with these programs. When people don't have things set up for double spacing in advance, they sort of try to manipulate the system. Like in the old days when people used typewriters, they get near the end of the line and they hit enter to force it to be double spaced, and that just creates lots of formatting problems. So please double space in advance. When you get to the end of the paragraph, you just hit enter once, not twice, not 3 times, not 10 times, and we just continue on our way. Okay? It might seem nitpicky, all these rules, but believe it or not, there's something sort of beautiful about a professionally presented document that follows a certain style system from top to bottom. Because what I see students do a lot, and again, I'm not trying to sound harsh, talking about constructive feedback, is that students like to make it look the way they want to. So they'll create extra spaces, and that's just not AP8 format. Okay. Now, let's say we're not on page 2. We're on page 4. We're on page 5, right? Your essay. Oops, I should have tabbed that over. Okay, you're typing away. It's your final paragraph. You're on page 4 or 5. You're done. Yay, yippee. Okay, let's say that's the end of our paper. We hit enter again until we get to the very first line of a new page. I'm there. Okay, we type the word references, not references page, not works cited, not sources. Okay, just the elegant, simple word references, and then we center it. And this is where our references page entries go, which we worked on last week, but I'm going to quickly just give you some refreshers because I do feel like I went through it so quickly last week so that you could know how to do it for your briefs that I don't think I went through it carefully enough. So I have some things already open to use as examples. So I've already found this article in the LA Film School database. It's related to my topic of streaming music and royalty rates. Let's say I like this article. I know I'm going to want to use it. I'm going to want to quote from it. I'm going to want to use statistics from it. Remember last time I mentioned that there's this little cite tool to the right? Okay, use this tool. You click on cite, and it gives you the APA citation. Right, there it is. However, and this is the part that I sort of skipped last week because I didn't want to overwhelm you, the citation generator makes lots of mistakes. It gets most of the core information right, but it makes, for example, authors' names are not in all caps. Titles, article titles, actually follow normal rules for capitalization. By normal, I mean the first letter of the first word gets capitalized, but other words do not, unless someone's proper name appears in the middle of the title. So if the word Spotify appeared here, you would capital the S in Spotify. If Rihanna's name appears here, you would capitalize the R in Rihanna. So we can take this APA reference, and actually, I'm going to show you in real time how to do this. We just need to fix all the errors. So I'm going to just copy it, take it to my Microsoft Word document, paste it in. In my version of Word, I get this little tool option here, so I can just click on Match Destination Format, and that changes the font so it matches the font I've already been using. Remember, we're using one consistent font size and style for the entire document. If you don't remember how to do that, you can just highlight the whole thing and choose a font and a size. Okay, but I've already fixed it. Now I'm going to fix all those nitpicky details. So Nopper needs to be lowercase. These words, here, let me blow this up even larger. These words need to be uncapitalized. And there's a final thing we need to do, which is we need to put the words retrieved from, go back to the database, and to the right, you have this little thing here called a permalink. It looks like a little chain link symbol. That's what I need, because if you just go up here and grab the URL, I'll get an error. So for anything found through the LA Film School library database, I need the permalink. So the permalink comes up. It's right here. I'll copy that over right after the words retrieve from. Finally, the references page follows opposite rules for indentation. Okay, regular paragraphs, we indent the first line of a new paragraph. Other lines are not indented. Here, it's the opposite. First line is not indented, but any additional lines are. So I'll just highlight these additional lines. This is a tough move. You have to grab this little guy here and move it over. Boom. Okay. There's my APA citation. Easy, 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 easy. If you know where to find the information, how to quickly fix it, and add the permalink. Now, let's say I go online to find an article. Okay, so let me get rid of this. And here's an article, Taylor Swift's Spotify Paycheck Mystery, Time Magazine. Okay, we have everything we need. An author's name, Jack Dickey, a year of publication, 2014, and a title. I'm going to go ahead and copy the title because I already know I'm going to need that. and we just follow the same rules. Okay, so they're arranged alphabetically, by the way. So Dickey, his first initial was J. The year was 2014. I'm going to put that title in there and fix the ridiculous font. Here's a good example too, right? T and Taylor will stay capitalized. That's her name. S and Swift will stay capitalized. That's her name. Spotify will stay capitalized. It's a proper noun. But paycheck and mystery will be put in lowercase. And just like here, the publication is Rolling Stone. In this case, the publication, we already know that. It's Time. If it's from a website, just put the name of the website in italics. And here we just need to add the words again, retrieve from. But in this case, it's perfectly fine just to take the URL. Okay, it's from a general website. So that's what we need. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, paste it in, and look at that. Okay. I hate seeing those squiggly lines, so I'm going to fix all that. Okay, that's what a references page looks like. Now, how easy was that in real time? You can be honest. Did it seem confusing? Did it seem like too many steps? Did it seem... It's not terribly difficult. Okay, I know APA can seem nitpicky. I know it can seem like it's 10 million steps, but it really is simple because it's all about just finding the example, finding the rule, finding the model, and imitating it. Okay, and if you need to, you can go back and watch this part of the session if you need to follow these steps again. And I hope you can see too, like from an instructor's viewpoint, when it's in this format, it just looks more. Here, let me make it smaller. It looks more professional. It looks more elegant. Okay. But remember, you have other places to find this information. Your McGraw-Hill readings cover this stuff. Project APA info, I already showed it once. Here it is again. Okay, or it was there. Okay, I've shown this before. It covers everything, the references page. So if you need information on, well, how do I cite a website? It has there. I just showed you in real time, but in case you forgot, go here. Project APA info. If you need a reminder of what the format needs to look at, you get an example, right? It's not popping up right now, but if you click on the file, it will pop up. Okay, here's another example where you can see it in real time. Actually, real time is the wrong word, but okay, so you have all these resources to use. So it's not terribly difficult. Also, if you look at the McGraw-Hill readings or Project APA info, you'll get nitpicky information like, what do you do if there's no author? Or what do you do if there's no date? Let's imagine that this first entry, and here, let me blow it up a little bit bigger so you can see. Let's say Taylor Swift Spotify Paycheck Mystery had no date. There's a rule to deal with that. We just put the abbreviation ND. Okay. What if there was no author? Then these two things, the year of publication and the title, actually get switched around. And it would look like this. Title first, then year, and then the remaining information. Okay, but you only find this information if you go and find the relevant reading or example, either on that Project APA info website or in your textbook readings. So I'm not trying to pass the buck. I'm not trying to ignore the nitpicky rules. It's just that the information is there. You just sort of need to find it. But most of you will probably find examples that are in these sorts of situations, and it really is that simple. Okay. Good. How many of you followed along? Okay, good. Here's the other thing. If you followed along and got most of it right, you're set. Like, you don't have to mess around with margins or headers or page numbers or centering or paragraphing. Like, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just start typing away. So whatever, if you're happy with what you just created and you think you got most of it right, go ahead and save that template. So you can just open it up again when you're ready to write your essay next week and you already have those things set up. Okay, but it really is that simple. I hope this makes it clear too, because last week I didn't mean to rush through how to properly create an APA style reference. But now now that I've showed it in real time, I think it hopefully is a bit more clear. Project APA info, use it. Okay, write this down, take a screenshot. Everything, I think I mentioned this last week, but what's great about this website is that it's designed for students. It eliminates most of the esoteric, really rare things that you'll probably never have to deal with and just focuses on the basics. So run to that website when needed. Okay, I told you I didn't have as much to cover this week. I really just wanted to remind you of the essence of peer review and that you should be entering the peer review discussion board with the with the mindset you're going to be as helpful as possible, specific as possible, positive as possible. And if you're doing those things and trying to give your classmates the most useful feedback you can, you should do pretty well on that activity. And the rest of the time, we've just focused on APA, and I hope that's been useful because I've shown it in real time. If you have questions, I'm free to answer them. If you're comfortable with everything we went over, by the way, all the quiz questions relate to this session. So about half the questions deal with general questions about peer review. The other questions have to deal with APA. There are no write-in essay type answers. I actually think it's probably the easiest quiz you'll take during the month, but they are related to this session. Okay, Montana asked for part one. Are you talking about reposting the brief onto the community board or to the assignment? I'm not sure what that means. It just literally means taking your brief that you handed in on Sunday and posting it to the discussion board. Okay, I think you already did it, right? Didn't I see your submission on the board? If so, that's part one. You've already done part one. Yeah, part one is so simple. It's not even really much of an assignment. Part two is really the meat of the activity, responding to at least two